Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the bedrock, the absolute origin story of how one alcoholic helps another. We're talking about that first critical meeting between Bill W. and Dr. Bob.
Right. This wasn't just some chance encounter. It was, intense. Two guys at the end of their rope, and somehow their meeting creates the prototype, the very first example of carrying the message that actually worked.
Exactly. It's the ground zero for mutual aid in this context.
And that's our focus for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the elements of what's sometimes called Dr. Bob's nightmare, basically analyzing the specific formula, the blueprint Bill W. used that finally clicked for Dr. Bob when nothing else had.
So we've gathered the sources, looking at the environment, the medical ideas of the time, the spiritual principles floating around.
To pull apart the message Bill carried into three inseparable pieces.
Okay, let's name them. First, the medical reality, getting that understanding straight.
Yep. Trip.
Second, the personal story, that power of identification, of shared experience. And third, the spiritual solution, a concrete path forward. Our mission is to really distill the core principles from that very first successful exchange.
And for you listening, this goes way beyond just addiction recovery, really. Understanding how this works. It's a masterclass in communication, That whole idea of attraction, not promotion, super valuable if you're trying to connect with anyone who's, still suffering, whatever that might look like for them.
Burnout, isolation, anything really.
Right. So we want to give you a quick but pretty thorough grasp of these founding concepts because they really were revolutionary at the time.
Okay, so let's dive in. The big question, what was it? What was that specific formula, the combination of things that worked for these two men when literally decades of trying doctors, promises, willpower had just completely failed?
Yeah.
Two, setting the stage, the desperation and the drive to connect.
Well, to get why Bill's message landed so hard in Akron back in May 35, you first got to picture Bill's own state. I mean, his sobriety was brand new, shaky even.
Yeah, he'd had this huge spiritual awakening, felt transformed leaving Count's hospital. But then, bam, back in the real world, the old thinking, the self-will, it came rushing back.
He realized pretty fast that those spiritual principles weren't like a vaccine, not a one-shot deal. They needed constant upkeep, active work.
And the sources really point to this breakthrough realization he had.
Yeah.
His survival, his own sobriety, absolutely depended on finding another alcoholic to talk to carry the message.
It wasn't just being a nice guy. It was like existential for him, a total necessity.
Think about how it happened for him. He gets this gift of surrender, right? But it took two things. First, Dr. Silkworth giving him the medical piece. You're sick, not bad.
Crucial step one, removes the shame barrier a little bit.
And then his friend Ebby shows up, sharing these practical spiritual ideas from the Oxford group. So Bill gets the diagnosis and the potential solution.
And he has this moment, this wonderful certainty, the sources call it, that loads of alcoholics could get this same freedom, this amazing gift.
But then it starts to fade. The moment he stops actively trying to pass it on, he feels himself slipping. He's literally in that hotel lobby in Akron, about to drink.
Terrible moment, the brink.
Until it hits him like a ton of bricks. I need a drunk.
Yeah.
I have to carry this message.
Yeah.
And right there, that's the paradox that underpins everything, isn't it?
Absolutely. We keep it by giving it away.
Which sounds simple, but it's easily misunderstood.
Oh, yeah. People think it means, like, preaching or fixing people. But the way Bill and Bob quickly figured it out, giving it away meant sharing your story.
What we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. That exact formula.
Right. It takes vulnerability. You got to be willing to show your own mess, empathize, and just listen, not lecture.
And Bill definitely learned that the hard way. Before Dr. Bob, he tried talking to other alcoholics, and it was a disaster.
Total failure.
Because he came at them like a preacher on fire.
Yeah.
Trying to force his beliefs onto them.
He admitted later he was still driven by the old stuff, wanting recognition, wanting to be the guy with the answers, even if he wrapped it up in what he called a spiritual alibi. Sneaky ego.
Yeah, that spiritual alibi is a dangerous thing.
It really is. The motive has to be cleaner.
Yeah.
Think about Ebby, the guy who helped Bill. When Ebby knew Bill was in deep trouble, he didn't just think about it or send a note.
No, he resolved to go see him. He took action. He crossed the street, literally and figuratively.
That decisiveness, that willingness to reach out when someone's desperate, that's like the absolute first move in this whole process of spiritual help. It proves it needs action, not just warm, fuzzy thoughts.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. What was the spiritual weather like back then? this Akron group that Bill and Bob started, it didn't just pop out of nowhere.
No, definitely not. It had really strong ties to the Oxford group. That was a Christian fellowship, non-denominational, but pretty intense.
Yeah.
And their methods really shaped the early days.
What were their core ideas?
They pushed for really high standards, what they called the four absolutes: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Big stuff. And guidance, believing you could get direct guidance from a personal God. Meetings started with prayer, serious reflection.
And their main tool for change?
They called it witness, or sometimes sharing, basically telling others the reasons for and the results of your own surrender to God, your story.
But done carefully, right?
Yeah, they stressed using common sense, being kind. But that sharing, that personal testimony, was seen as the engine of transformation. So you see, the framework for the 12th step carrying the message was kind of already there.
But Bill instinctively knew, especially after his first failed attempts, that just hitting someone with spiritual talk wasn't going to cut it. Not for a guy like Dr. Bob.
Exactly. For an alcoholic, especially one as beaten down, but also as, well, proud as a doctor might be, admitting defeat, surrendering. That's terrifying for the ego. Bill needed something to, like, wedge the door open first. The crowbar. And that was the medical diagnosis. He couldn't start with God. He had to start with the disease. 3, the medical foundation, defining the disease.
Right. Let's talk about that crowbar, because this is the piece that finally let Bill get past Dr. Bob's defenses. Bill didn't walk into that house with just good intentions. He came armed with a specific medical opinion from his doctor, Silkworth.
Dr. William Silkworth. Yeah, the physician at Towns Hospital in New York who treated Bill. His big contribution was insisting, really hammering home, that Bill's problem wasn't weak character. It wasn't a moral failing. It was an illness.
And that shift is just monumental, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely critical, because it takes the alcoholic out of the frame of being this, morally corrupt failure who just keeps choosing wrong and puts them in the frame of someone with a fatal chronic disease. That's a whole different ballgame. It allows for humility, which is essential for recovery.
Okay, but here's the tricky part then. If that diagnosis gave them the self-knowledge, okay, I have a disease, it's bigger than my willpower, why did Bill still nearly drink again? And why did Dr. Bob keep struggling so hard even after hearing it? Was the science wrong, or?
That is the question, isn't it? And it points directly to why the spiritual part is absolutely necessary, not just a nice add-on. The science, as Silkworth laid it out, was brilliant for explaining the problem, but it didn't give them the power to stop the thinking that led back to the drink.
So the diagnosis described the cage but didn't hand over the key.
Perfectly put. It described the cage in devastating detail. 3 parts, really, that locked together.
Okay, let's break those down. Part 1 was the physical allergy.
Correct. Silkworth's idea was that the alcoholic's body reacts differently, abnormally, to alcohol. Once alcohol enters the system, it triggers this intense physical craving that's completely beyond mental control. It's not an allergy like hives.
Right, not like peanuts.
No. It's a unique reaction where the body demands more, uncontrollably. Dr. Bob himself started explaining it this way later on, very simply. If you're allergic to strawberries, you don't eat them. Well, an alkie is the same way. He's allergic to alcohol. For them, it's poison that perversely creates a demand for more poison.
Okay, so the body goes haywire demanding more. But we know people can have cravings and not drink. So what's the next piece? That must be the mental obsession.
Exactly. This is the psychological piece, and maybe even scarier. Because even when the alcoholic is sober, feeling terrible, knowing the consequences, their mind stays obsessed with drinking.
How? Why?
It's trapped in this cycle, condemned to drink against all logic because of this powerful, persistent illusion.
The illusion? Say it again.
The illusion that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking.
That sounds familiar. This time it'll be different, Trap.
That's the great obsession. It's like the mind conveniently forgets all the nightmare scenarios, all the pain, all the promises broken, and just focuses on this fantasy of controlled, happy drinking. It's insane thinking. Literally, it drives them back to the first drink, even when they know better.
Okay, so body demands more, mind obsesses over the fantasy. What's the final lock? That's the compulsion, right?
Yeah.
Specifically linked to the first drink.
That's the trigger. Because of the physical allergy, the moment an alcoholic takes that first drink, even just one flight, the whole uncontrollable process kicks off. The allergy demands more, the compulsion takes over, and the mental obsession has already paved the way. That first drink is the point of no return for that bout. It's the fatal step.
Wow. Allergy, obsession, compulsion. It's a perfect trap. No wonder willpower fails.
Utterly hopeless against that combination.
But the key thing about hearing this diagnosis, the so what of it all, is the self-knowledge it brings.
Yes. Finally, it explains the incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop. For the first time, maybe, the alcoholic sees that their seemingly irrational actions are symptoms of a disease beyond their control.
Which is the necessary groundwork for step 1. Right. Admitting you're powerless over alcohol, that your life is unmanageable.
Exactly. The problem is bigger than you. Your brain, your body, they're compromised. Only by admitting that complete powerlessness can the ego deflate enough to even consider looking for help outside of yourself.
It's the ultimate ego crusher. It says, you are not in charge here. The disease is...
Total deflation. Necessary deflation.
But back to my earlier question then. If they knew all this, if the science laid out their powerlessness so clearly, why wasn't that enough? Why did they still need something spiritual?
Because, as Bill found out the hard way, the diagnosis explains the what and the why, but it doesn't provide the how. How do you live day to day without acting on the obsession? Bill had the full diagnosis when he left Towns, the best medical understanding available. Yet, as he put it, the frightful day came when I drank once more. He knew he was powerless over alcohol, but the deeper realization was he was powerless over living. He couldn't cope with just regular life. Emotions, stress, boredom.
He needed a power source for that.
Exactly. He needed a new kind of power, not just to stay sober, but to be restored to sanity, to deal with life on life's terms. And that's where the spiritual angle comes in. 4, the spiritual solution. Restoring sanity and connection.
Okay, so step 1 is admitting defeat based on the medical facts. You're powerless, life's unmanageable. That leaves you pretty raw, pretty vulnerable. What's the constructive path forward from there?
And that's where the second half of Bill's message to Dr. Bob really kicks in, the spiritual solution. Once you've accepted complete defeat, the next step is to find, or at least become willing to believe in, a power greater than yourself that could restore you to sanity. That's step 2.
So the medical acceptance has to flow right into a spiritual openness.
Immediately. You can't stay in that place of just knowing you're doomed. You need hope and a source of help beyond your own broken resources.
And Bill could share this in a way that wasn't, heavy religious dogma, right?
Yeah.
Because of his own experience and the Oxford group influence.
Exactly. Thanks to Ebby and the Oxford group's practical approach, the idea wasn't about signing up for a specific religion. It was about a willingness to rely on a higher power, however you understood that power. It was results-oriented. Does it help you stay sober and live better? That was the test.
Super pragmatic.
Very. And the sources really highlight how this spiritual approach directly tackled the crippling loneliness that almost every alcoholic feels.
Oh, yeah. The isolation, shame, secrets. It drives you inward.
Totally. Almost without exception, alcoholics are tortured by loneliness, one source says. The spiritual program hits this head-on with specific actions, like step 5.
Admitting to God, to ourselves, and crucially to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs.
That's the killer app, in a way. Taking that terrifying step, sharing your worst stuff, your secrets, your fears with another person. It just shatters that sense of terminal uniqueness.
You realize you're not the only one.
Right. You find true kinship with man and God, as the book puts it. You connect, and that connection starts to heal the isolation that feeds the obsession.
And this is exactly what Bill did with Bob, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He didn't lecture him about his drinking. He shared his own story, his own failures, his own despair, and how he found relief.
He met Bob's pain with his own experience. That identification, I know what you're feeling because I've been there, that's incredibly powerful. It opens the door to trusting the solution being offered.
So the spiritual piece isn't just philosophical. It has this very practical job, restoring sanity.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
The idea is to create like an island of relief inside the alcoholic's head. A space where the constant grinding need to numb out to escape feelings with a drink isn't the only driving force anymore.
You break the cycle of pain leading to drinking, leading to more pain.
Exactly. When you lessen the emotional turmoil that fuels the obsession through things like admitting wrongs, making amends, helping others, you create mental space. And in that space, actual choice can start to emerge.
Instead of just reacting on autopilot.
Right. You can actually think about your feelings and decide how to respond, rather than just having that knee-jerk impulse to drink over them. The spiritual practices disrupt the addiction's automaticity and let rational thought, let sanity come back online.
And the core message Bill brought to Bob was pretty straightforward, wasn't it?
Deceptively simple, really. Look, making a sincere effort to follow these basic spiritual principles, admit defeat, find a power, connect with others, clean up your past, help someone else. This stuff is keeping people like me sober. It wasn't some fancy psychological trick or a new drug.
It was just something better than willpower.
That's it, something that actually worked.
And the proof for Bob was almost immediate. His official sobriety date, June 10th, 1935. Right after his surgery, he goes and makes some restitution, takes that symbolic last beer Bill gives him.
To steady his hands for the operation, yeah. A practical measure, but symbolic too.
And boom, the drinking stops. And was it the very next thing in his mind?
Service. Helping someone else. Instantly, the idea of service in his heart. That immediate pivot from self-obsession to outward focus, that is the spiritual solution in action. The minute he got free, he wanted to give it away. V, the first act in action, the principles of sponsorship.
So Dr. Bob, last drink, barely down, and he's immediately thinking, okay, who's next? He was eager to join Bill in finding another drunk to fix, as they charmingly put it back then.
Yeah, fix sounds a bit dated now, but the impulse was pure step 12. That immediate turn outward.
Right. It's step 12 happening in real time.
Yeah.
Having had a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
We tried to carry this message.
It wasn't like, oh, maybe I'll do that someday when I'm feeling stronger. It was understood from the jump as essential, the ongoing action that maintains your own sobriety. You have to work with others, or you risk slipping back yourself.
And this points to a really key difference between this approach and, say, the earlier Washingtonian movement, which eventually fizzled out. The method became crucial.
Absolutely. The method was baked into the core principle, attraction, not promotion.
Say more about that. What does it mean in practice?
Well, Bill and Bob, through trial and error, especially Bill's early failures, learned they couldn't make anyone get sober. They couldn't argue them into it or force them or even give them direct advice on how to run their lives.
It's no fixing.
No fixing. All they could reliably offer was their own experience. Here's the medical truth about our shared illness. Here's the spiritual path that worked for me. And then, just as important, the willingness to sit with someone, listen without judgment, and truly empathize. Share the journey.
That distinction is huge, isn't it? People are drawn to recovery when they see someone else living it, when they see that sustained sobriety and the peace that comes with it. They want what that person has.
Exactly. But they run screaming if they feel like they're getting a sales pitch or being told what to do or being judged. The focus had to shift completely away from trying to manage the newcomer and towards simply managing your own recovery and being a living example.
Let the results speak for themselves.
Pretty much. And Dr. Boehm just dove into this head first. He became relentless in practical service. Started focusing right away on two main groups. Potential new members.
Finding the next suffering alcoholic.
And also keeping an eye on the current members who seem shaky, maybe on the verge of a slip. He was incredibly dedicated.
There's that early story in the sources, right? About Bob and another member, JD. They noticed a guy in the group was acting off, swearing a lot, missing meetings.
Yeah, classic warning signs.
And they didn't just gossip about it or wait for him to fall apart. They immediately decided we need to go see him. That proactive preventative care, that became a hallmark of early sponsorship. Reach out before the crash.
That's responsibility. And Bob didn't just keep it within the group meetings either. He actively took the message to where people were physically hurting. He started working with Sister Ignatia over at St. Thomas Hospital in Akron.
Which was a big deal because another hospital had basically told him to get lost.
Yeah.
Right? So take his jittering patients somewhere else.
Yeah, he faced rejection. But St. Thomas, and Sister Ignatia in particular, opened the door. It became this crucial early hub for detoxing alcoholics within a supportive, understanding environment.
And what made Bob so effective there, working alongside the medical staff?
Sister Ignatia apparently said it was his unique ability to connect. He wasn't just a doctor, he was an alcoholic doctor. He could walk into the room with someone shaking, fresh off a bender, and say, I know exactly how you feel. He provided that identification piece that the regular staff couldn't.
He embodied both sides of the message.
Perfectly. He shared his story, his experience, with Sister Ignatia too, giving her the whole picture, a resume, as one source calls it, of what they were achieving with this new approach. He naturally blended the two kinds of communication you need.
Okay, what are those two types again? Let's be clear.
First, you need the communication that gives information, the hard facts, the medical reality of the allergy, the obsession, the compulsion. This is what breaks through the intellectual denial, the it's not that bad thinking.
Got it. Information for the head.
And second, you need the communication that invites identification, the personal story, sharing the suffering, the despair, and then the hope and the recovery. This breaks through the emotional isolation, the feeling that nobody understands.
Information for the head, identification for the heart.
That's a great way to put it. Science and spirituality, facts and feelings. That blend is what made the message stick.
And this led to that very practical, unofficial slogan they used.
Identify, don't compare.
Explain that one.
It means look for the common feelings, the shared experience of powerlessness and obsession, not the surface details. Maybe you were a doctor like Bob, maybe you were homeless. Doesn't matter. Did you feel that insanity around alcohol? Did you feel hopeless? That's the identification point.
Don't get hung up on whether your story matches exactly.
Right. The only thing that matters is finding someone who has found a way out, who has the key to sobriety, and realizing that these stories, these legacies of suffering and of recovery, as the book says, can be passed from one alcoholic to another, that sharing is the engine.
It proves you're not alone and that there's a path forward.
It transfers hope. That's the core of mutual aid. 6, conclusion, final provocative thought.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it really seems clear that the success of that first encounter, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, the launch of this whole thing, it wasn't luck. It was this deliberate fusion of those 3 key things.
Yeah, a potent combination.
1, the undeniable medical truth you have an illness. 2, the courageous vulnerability sharing your own mess to connect. And 3, the immediate action applying spiritual principles like admitting powerlessness and turning outwards to help the next person.
It was basically a strategy for survival built on connection.
Absolutely.
And you know, it's important to remember that this intense focus on spiritual principles and person-to-person connection wasn't just a philosophical choice at first. It was kind of forced on them.
How so?
Because they were dirt poor. The early fellowship had 0 money. Our sources remind us they were constantly struggling financially, and that poverty, ironically, might have saved them spiritually.
You're talking about the Rockefeller dinner story.
Exactly. That famous meeting at the Union League Club in New York. Bill, Bob, and the early guys thought this was their big break. They're presenting their amazing new recovery method to John D. Rockefeller Jr. in a room full of, financial heavyweights.
They must have thought, okay, our money problems are over. We can finally fund this properly.
The tension must have been incredible. Bill and Bob lay out their case, the miracle stories. Then Nelson Rockefeller gets up to speak for his father. He praises them, calls it a work of pure goodwill, one man helping the next.
Sounds promising.
And then he drops the bomb. He says, essentially, because this is a work of pure goodwill, it shouldn't need much, if any, outside money. He argued that bringing in big donations risked professionalizing it, ruining the spiritual peer-to-peer core.
Wow. So what happened?
He finished speaking, and the entire group of potential donors, all these wealthy capitalists, they just got up and walked out, left them without a single cent.
Devastating. A total fundraising failure.
On the surface, yes. But in hindsight, maybe the best thing that ever happened to them. That absolute lack of money forced them to rely on the spiritual principles, self-support through member contributions only, humility, focusing purely on carrying the message one alcoholic at a time.
It kept the focus pure, preventing distractions like chasing funding or building a big organization.
Exactly. It embedded the spiritual DNA right into the structure, or lack thereof, which leads perfectly into our final thought for you today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Bill W. was always kind of haunted by history, specifically the history of the Washingtonian movement back in the 1800s.
Right. They had huge success initially, helped maybe 100,000 alcoholics.
Massive numbers.
Okay.
Then they just vanished. Bill noted how they so completely disappeared that few of us had ever heard of it. Gone.
And the lesson Bill and the other founders took from that was stark.
Extremely. They realized their own society, no matter how successful it seemed, was fragile. They had to prudently cleave to its single purpose, the carrying of the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Stick to the knitting. Don't get sidetracked.
So here's the question to chew on.
If the Washingtonians had the numbers, the initial impact, but faded away, how utterly crucial is AA's relentless focus on that single purpose? On service, on anonymity, placing principles before personalities, and crucially, resisting outside funding and the potential compromises that come with it. Is that intense, almost stubborn purity, born partly from that initial financial rejection, the very thing that ensures this message, the one sparked in Dr. Bob's nightmare, actually endures.
It's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes the biggest perceived failure, like getting no money from Rockefeller, is actually the key ingredient for long-term integrity and survival. Where else might that seemingly counterintuitive idea apply? Something to think about.